Hey everyone, Skunny here, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Asus routers. Um, I was in the market for a new router because I'm using only the Verizon FiOS router currently, and so I wanted something that was a little bit better at boosting the signal around the house. So I started off by just researching all the routers out there, and I really like Asus products, so I figured why not give the Asus routers a try. So I decided to go with the Asus AC3100 wireless router, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about that router as well as the three other top of the line Asus routers as well, because if you're out there like me going to find the best router for you, there are some caveats to this router as well as comparing it to the other three that are on the market. So let's get right into it. There are four top gaming routers on the market right now for Asus, and those four are the Asus AC3200, the Asus AC3100, and we'll get a little bit into the differences between these. So don't pay attention to the numbers there because they're kind of deceiving. The next one is the Asus AC88u. And finally, the very top of the line, the AC5300. The Asus AC3100, which is the one I purchased, and the Asus AC88u are the same thing. The only difference between them are the number of LAN ports on the back of the router. The 88U has 8 LAN ports on the back. The 3100 only has 4 LAN ports on the back. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same when it comes to features and all the other input output data rates, things like that. They're the exact same thing, and they look like they're the exact same thing if you don't turn them around and see the ports and so forth. So and the price point matches that. So you're going to be paying a little bit more, I think like $20 more for the 88U because it has those extra ports as opposed to the 3100. Now, that being said, the one before these two models is the 3200. Now that's where it gets kind of confusing because you think 3200, that's got to be better than the 3100, right? Wrong. For these routers, the 3200 is the bottom of the totem pole. It might have more antennae or antennas, however you say it, than the two that I just mentioned, and it might have a higher number, but it is lesser in every way than the other two. And then finally, the top of the line is the AC5300, and that's like the newest out, the extremist in every way wireless router. So let's start off with the major differences between the four. Well, I should say between the three because the 88U and the 3100 are the same. So I'll refer to them as the same thing pretty much. So right off the bat, between the three different types, the 3200 is a tri-band as well as the 5300 is a tri-band wireless router. That means they have two 5 gigahertz wireless signals and one 2.4 gigahertz wireless signal. The 88U and the 3100 are both dual band, so just one 5 gigahertz, one 2.4 gigahertz. So that's the major difference right off the bat between these. The data rates wirelessly are sort of different. Now, the wireless data rate for the 3200, you'll see certain places say up to 3.2 gigabytes per second, but that's like perfect world. The 3200 is usually going to get around 450 megabytes per second throughput on average on the wireless N, or the wireless N signal. The wireless AC signal is a little bit higher. The 88U and the 3100 clock in around 600 megabytes per second on the N signal, the wireless N signal, and upwards of 1500 megabytes per second to 1700 megabytes per second on the wireless AC signal. And the 5300 is 5.3 gigabytes per second. So seeing that right there, I could see how they kind of wanted to go through the naming of it. The 3200 doing 3.2 gigabytes per second, the other two doing 3100, and so forth, and 5.3 gigabytes for the 5300. So that's probably where they got their naming convention from, which to me it just obscures the actuality of how good these things really are. Now, the 5300, it says 5.3 gigabytes per second up to that for the data rate. You're going to average around 1,000 megabytes per second on the wireless N, and around 2,000 megabytes per second on the wireless AC network or interface. Like I said, the 3200 and the 5300 are both tri-bands. The AC3100 and the 88U, which are the same, are dual band. The antenna situation is a little different. There are 6 antenna on the 3200. They share the load of both transmitting and receiving, as well as the 4 antenna on the 2 mid-ranged ones, which the 3100 and the 88U are 4 antenna, and they also share the load for receiving and emitting signal. The 5300, however, has 8 antenna, and 4 are dedicated for transmitting and 4 are dedicated for receiving. So that's where on the 5300 you're going to see most of the boost towards your throughput, is because of that, the way the antenna is set up, if you're using wireless, of course. I do want to say that the and you can see in some of the clips that I have, it is smaller. The 3100 was smaller than I expected it to be from the pictures, but that's just me. Some people might look at it and say this thing's a monster. So let's see. Features wise, they're pretty much the same. So they're going to have a lot of the same features built in. The main difference between the features, the 3200, I believe, is a 1.2 gigahertz processor inside of it, as well as 128 megabytes of flash and 256 megabytes of RAM. The 2 mid-range, the 88U and 3100, are 1.4 gigahertz dual-core processors with half a gig of RAM and 256 megabytes of flash. And then finally, the top of the line 5300 is also a 1.4 gigahertz processor, but it has a gig of RAM and half a gig of flash. So you're going to see a little bit more boost of performance on that as well. The top line from the 88U, the 3100, and the 5300 all support teaming of or link aggregation of Ethernet ports. So if you have two ports on the back of your computer, two Ethernet ports, or two Ethernet ports on the back of, like, say, a media storage, like a network attached storage NAS device, these support link aggregation, so you can plug the two Ethernet ports directly into the back of the router to have that throughput, or the two ports from the NAS into the back of the router to have that extra boost on the network. Now, that being said, you can only do that once. So you can only have one device hooked up to use link aggregation. You can't use, so say you have the 4 LAN ports, you can only use 2 of those for link aggregation. And then the other 2 would have to be just regular set up to one device each. You can't use 2 for, say, your link aggregation to your PC and then the other 2 for link aggregation to your NAS. So it won't work that way. You have to have it only supports one set. Also with the 5300, it also supports the ability to seamlessly integrate wireless access points or signal boosters, to where you don't need to have the access point named a different thing. Like, I know, like, if you ever were in a mall or like a large office building, you're hooked up to one wireless name and logged into that wireless network, and no matter where you go in the building, it automatically seamlessly pushes you from one access point to the other without you having to manually go in, find the closest access point, log into that, or the need of an app to do it for you automatically. So this does support the ability to do that within your home, so you don't have to have basically 2 separate SSIDs, wireless names to connect to. Now, that being said, I don't know if that works with other wireless access points other than the Asus. I don't know if you have to buy the Asus routers. From what I was reading on, it didn't say anything explicitly about needing the Asus access points, which can get pretty pricey. But that being said, I'm sure there are a few forum posts somewhere that I missed that would explain that a little bit better. Price point wise, the 3200 is around $200, which is the cheapest version. Then you get up to about $250 to $280, depending on if you want the 3100 or the 88U. The 88U being more expensive because it has those extra LAN ports. And then you get upwards of $300, like around $350 for the 5300. So these are all higher end wireless routers to be dealing with. The review of the AC3100 is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's a router. I plugged it in, and I'll go a little bit into about the setup that I needed to do because I have FiOS. But it working wise, it works perfectly. I get signals in the house where I didn't before. Even with I had an access point set up. And this new router boosts the signal to where I don't even need that access point. I can still directly connect to the router itself without needing to do that. And this router is in the far back corner of the house, like literally far back corner of the house in this office. And I got another 4 rooms that way on the first floor and second floor before I get to the front of the house. So it boosts the signal fine. I'm getting 3 bars most of the time, all the way at the front of the house. Even outside of the house, I'm getting 2 to 3 bars. So it definitely does its job that wise. So I mean, that's as much as a review that you can get with a router. I mean, does it do its job? Does it boost the signal? Is it a steady current signal that I don't have to keep on resetting the router or have to worry about it doing its job? Yeah, okay, great. That review done. Now, that being said, there are some caveats if you're going to try using this router with Verizon FiOS. Now, what I came to realize is, luckily I had this done before I even went to use this router, was you can have a FiOS set up one of 2 ways. You can have it done through the coax cable, to where the coax comes into the box that they put down in like the first floor, the basement, or on the outside of the house for Verizon. The coax cable would come in. The coax would come up to the router, the Verizon router / converter. And then that converter router would convert to Ethernet. So it would go to the box, coax would come up, and then you would go from the box to Ethernet. The second way is they run Ethernet line from the box outside on the house, bring that Ethernet line in, and then you would have Ethernet from that box to your wireless router. So you wouldn't need the coax converter or the coax cable to Ethernet conversion. It's already done on the back end. And luckily I had that done already, because it can get, from what I read, it can get pricey for trying to get them to do it, depending on how your service is set up. So luckily all I had to do was unplug the WAN port on the FiOS router, plug that into the Asus router, and then I was good to go. So I'm not even using the FiOS at all. I do have a coax cable plugged into the FiOS box still, but that's for my TVs. That's not for anything to deal with the internet. If you have it the other way, you'll need either them to convert it for you, or you'll need a converter box yourself, or you'll need to set it up to where everything's still hooked up to the FiOS router, and then you just have the Asus router set up as an access point. So the WAN goes into your FiOS connection, or the coax goes into your FiOS connection. Then you have a LAN port from the FiOS going into the WAN. So LAN from FiOS into WAN of the Asus. And then it just takes that signal from the FiOS and boosts it using the Asus. So I avoided needing to do that and just using the Asus router itself. So that being said, like I said, it's a good router. I enjoy it. It does its job. Aside from the few complications with the FiOS and how it's set up and how I needed to do that, and I can link some of the forum posts that I read on how to get the router set up if you're using FiOS. But yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, please leave in the comments below. And I hope this was informative and helpful. And if you enjoyed it, hit the like button. And I appreciate it. Thanks. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.